Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gave a speech over the weekend at the National Governors Association, and some of the things he said during that speech made national headlines. In fact, many people commenting and demanding further understanding of the issue. What he was talking about was the degree to which, in America, the Communist Party of China has made headway in not just the highest levels of government, that's one level, but state governments, local governments, colleges, even lower school education. All of this was raised by the speech by the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, at the National Governors Association, with his point being that each of these 50 governors of America's 50 states has an obligation to understand what tactics that the Chinese people are engaging in, the Communist Party is engaging in, what are the tactics, how they're doing it, how they can see it, how to be wary about it, and just really to raise alarm bells about the fact that it's actually happening. I want to play a clip in this first five today, just a clip of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at the National Governors Association, and then we'll talk more about why this matters so much to America. Here's Mike Pompeo.
Last year, I received an invitation to an event that promised to be, quote, an occasion for exclusive deal-making. It said, quote, the opportunities for mutually beneficial economic development between China and our individual states are tremendous, end of quote. Deal-making sounds like it might have come from President Trump, but the invitation was actually from a former governor. I was being invited to the U.S.-China Governors Collaboration Summit. It was an event co-hosted by the National Governors Association and something called the Chinese People's Association for Friendship and Foreign Countries. Sounds pretty harmless. What the invitation did not say is that the group I just mentioned, is the public face of the Chinese Communist Party's official foreign influence agency, the United Front Work Department. Now, I was lucky. I was familiar with that organization from my time as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, but it got me thinking, how many of you made the link between that group and Chinese Communist Party officials? What if you made a new friend while you were at that event? What if your new friend asked you for introductions to other politically connected and powerful people? What if your new friend offered to invest big money in your state, perhaps in your pension, in industries sensitive to our national security? These aren't hypotheticals. These scenarios are all too true, and they impact American foreign policy significantly. Indeed, last year, a Chinese government-backed think tank in Beijing produced a report that assessed all 50 of America's governors on their attitudes towards China. They labeled each of you friendly, hardline, or ambiguous. The Chinese government has been methodical in the way it's analyzed our system, our very open system, one that we're deeply proud of. It's assessed our vulnerabilities, and it's decided to exploit our freedoms to gain advantage over us at the federal level, the state level, and the local level. What China does in Topeka and Sacramento reverberates in Washington and Beijing.
I have to tell you, folks, this whole speech, I was just making notes to myself, all the things I want to mention to you that he said during the speech. That was obviously just a short clip. Again, that was Secretary of State Mike Pompeo speaking to the National Governors Association. I want to make a couple points, or maybe 3 points, in this first five today. Number one, throughout the speech, the examples that the Secretary of State Pompeo gave to the National Governors Association are mostly things that were out in the open. They were not, hidden, like you have someone come to you and you think they are an American citizen and it turns out they're a Chinese spy. These are open activities by the Chinese government, and it is making penetration at state levels, at county levels, and universities. He meant the Confucius Institutes, big part of the discussion of the Confucius Institutes, which we talked about in the show before. But to be clear, China, under the guise of reaching out to America and creating cultural understanding and having better connection between the Chinese people and the American people, established Confucius Institutes on college campuses around this country, One supposed reason was to help with Chinese language learning, to begin learning Mandarin or other dialects used in China. But the larger point was supposedly very overtly to create understanding. But recently, numerous colleges in America have closed down the Confucius Institutes because what they recognize is not that the Chinese government was not just a friendly gesture by the Chinese government to try to build, bridges of understanding. It was to spread Chinese propaganda, to spread communist thinking, to spread socialist thinking on college campuses, to normalize among American students on college campuses the idea of socialism, the idea of communism. This is what the Confucius Institutes were. So number one, you had the Confucius Institutes, you had organizations like Secretary of State Pompeo was describing, where they are sold as wonderful events for American businesses and American government officials to come and connect with Chinese officials and Chinese businesses and understand better, and all this happy talk about understanding each other better and creating some kind of business connections. But beneath it all, what one of his points was, you have to understand the Chinese Communist government is forever dedicated to pushing communism, to spreading its power. China has, as we've talked about in the show many times before, we've had Gordon Chang on talking about it, other Chinese experts, China has a worldview at its core that China is intended to rule the world. Much of what China does with respect to their spreading of the 5G, the Huawei stuff, the Silk Road, Belt Road Initiative. You have the Chinese government volunteering to assist countries that can't quite afford the funding to build a port, to build some other entity in some other country, and especially this is happening in Africa, and then when the country cannot afford to pay back what the Chinese loaned them to build this port or other facility, the Chinese government takes control of it, says, well, you defaulted on your loan, you didn't pay us back, now it's ours. They're building their presence around the world. The ideas I want to get to in this show today, this show isn't really about China today, but it really is a hint of the mindset that actually is deeply embedded within the Chinese mindset, and specifically within the communist mindset. The communist mindset is never of the idea, okay, we're going to be communists, but we respect the right of other countries to live in freedom. We respect the right of other countries to love capitalism and freedom and entrepreneurship. The communist mentality is always about forcing itself, spreading it to others forcibly in some other way. So the kind of terms that Pompeo used in closing out today's first five, the Chinese are methodical. They obviously don't announce the takeover of the world tomorrow, but they are willing to work tenaciously, patiently, and relentlessly to spread their influence in every conceivable way. It is a tenacity, an unrelenting nature, and they are patient. What you heard Mike Pompeo saying at this National Governors Association, first of all, he wouldn't have said it unless it was something permissible, a message that the President Trump, wanted to have the world understand. It's a very public shot across the bow at China, telling them, we see what you're doing to our country, and we're going to push back. You're going to stop. You can't just keep doing this. So it was a wonderful thing, because really what China is pushing is utterly contrary to the Donald Trump Make America Great, America First agenda, which is reasserting the strength and the goodness and the rightness of having a strong economy in America. Utterly contrary to that is what the Chinese are pushing. So I don't think Mike Pompeo said this without the blessing and encouragement of President Trump. And it's a great message, again, on the President Trump agenda, that we are going to fight the attacks against America, whether they're coming at the southern border from caravans pouring through and we lose control of our border, whether they are weakening America's sovereignty by giving in to the United Nations and conceding more power to the United Nations and to agreements that previous administrations used. President Trump is saying, no, we're pulling back. We're pulling America together again. This message from Mike Pompeo is another one of those messages. We are going to reassert America in our country. We are not going to permit the Chinese government to, in the variety of ways it has been, to continue to take control, to advance its power, advance its agenda inside America. Just a great, great speech. Now, a last little tidbit on this. And by the way, I put a link to the speech up on our website, americacanwetalk.org. I found the transcript of the whole speech. It's not that long to read. You might want to read it yourself because it was full of examples of the way Pompeo is pointing out China is trying to take over America. Great speech by him. Clearly a message from the Trump administration to China and frankly to other people in America who have facilitated this. It's going to stop. We see what you're doing, and you're not going to get away with it. One last quick thing in America to mention. It was just announced today that America, our country, had finally made arrests of 4 Chinese military officials who are the ones who have been charged with the breaking into the networks of Equifax credit reporting agency and stealing personal information of tens of millions of Americans. Tens of millions of Americans. Equifax got hacked. Their credit reporting agency got hacked. And today we announced, our government announced that the people they arrested as responsible for this are indeed Chinese military members, 4 of them. They are charging with that hacking. So understand, China is always about expanding its power, always about getting control of America, always, and deeply resents America's role in the world. Clearly, America, the lone superpower again. China wants to be not just an equal superpower. They want to be the superpower to which America bends. And that, my friends, is today's First Five.